I thought I'd do this video because I've had a lot of emails and things from beginners recently, and they've had one or two problems. So I thought I'd cover the most common mistakes that can be made when using resin, and just preventing these mistakes will really help you and your resin work. These are in no particular order, apart from the very last one on this list, and that is the vital one. So important. Now I've got here arranged a few items of resin products that I use, and this is just a small sample of what I use. So number one, I would say measuring. Inaccurate measuring of your part A and part B can really cause problems with your curing. It may not cure, it may cure and be really flexible and like rubbery, or it may just be very sticky. The worst one is when you flash cure, and that is where it gets really hot really quickly, and as a result it just destroys. It goes yellow, cracks, and is just horrible and can burn you quite badly. All your resins should say on there how to mix them, and if it doesn't say it on the bottle, then it will have come with an information leaflet inside. So this one here, as you can see, I'm not sure if that can be seen really easily or not. Step one, mix resin A with hardener B in a 2-to-1 ratio by volume. So that means using milliliters or ounces in a mixing jug, you would want 2 part A. So let's say 200 milliliters of part A to 100 milliliters of part B. So you get 300 milliliters in total if you do it like that. What it's saying is don't mix it by weight. And that could be because one or the other of these weighs different to volume. So making sure that you use the correct measurements is vital. Now, if you do have to measure by weight, always turn on your scales, put your jug or whatever you're going to mix in it, and make sure you tear it back to 0 before you do anything else, because if not, you will get an inaccurate mix. That's one of the common mistakes. The other one is insufficient mixing. Now, there's quite a lot of mistakes you can do with mixing, and I actually have done a whole video on this in the past. So I'm going to mix up some resin here, and I'm going to show you what is going to be wrong with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this out, but then I'm going to mix it in this to show you, because it's easier to show you when you've got a wider top. This is just a 1-to-1 resin. Now I'm not going to waste this resin. I am going to use it. There we go. So I've got that in there. Now, one of the biggest problems is not mixing for long enough and not scraping the sides as you mix and the bottom of the pot, and then scraping your spatula or whatever you're using to mix with on the side. Because if you don't do that, what you're going to have is unmixed parts of part A and part B on the bottom and on the sides. Now, I go round and I mix quite slowly like this, and then every couple of mixes I scrape the sides and then do the bottom as well. And that way you're going to mix up your resin really well. But the other thing is not mixing it for long enough. Now, normally I mix my resin for about 3.5 to 4 minutes. One of the other biggest issues is when people mix too fast. So I'm going to show you what happens when you mix with a spatula too fast. What will happen is you will just fill this with so many bubbles. And this isn't a video about all the gadgets and things that you can get to get rid of bubbles and do all that, because I just want to show you what the common mistakes are. I know if I was to mix up like this, then I would definitely put it into my airless machine to get rid of the bubbles. But I'm not really talking about that. I want to talk to you about things that you shouldn't do and common mistakes. So look in there, I'm not sure if you can see, but that is absolutely full of bubbles. Let me pour it into there, and you can see now that that is full of bubbles, and that is the trouble. If you mix it really quickly, and we were to let that cure, all you would see on that, all the way through it, it would just be bubbles after bubble. Pour it in a plastic cup, and then you can see through it, and you just see all those bubbles. Now, some of these will disperse naturally, come to the top and burst, but a lot of them won't. And I know I hear a lot of people say, well, if you put a colour in it, it doesn't matter. But these bubbles then will tend to get trapped on the sides of things and causing the actual resin once it's cured, to have an uneven surface. See, look at that. It's almost translucent. There is so many bubbles in it. I'm going to pop that in my bubble removing machine and use it in a second for something. The other issue is working in an environment where it's not at a sufficient temperature for resin. Resin doesn't like being cold, but it doesn't like being too hot either. If it goes cold and it gets too cold and you're storing it outside, then it can go really thick and crystallize. Now, I have always available and in my room something that measures the temperature, and I work in both centigrade and Fahrenheit. I kind of flip between the two. At the moment, it's 72 in here, which is okay. I wouldn't want it to go more than about 75, which is about 22 degrees centigrade. So I'm always aware of what the temperature is in my room. If it's too cold, I'll stick a heater on. If it's too hot, I'll stick a fan on and put my extractor fan on and have a window open to try and get the warm air out of the room. If you work when it's too hot, you're likely to get your resin to cure up far too quickly, flash cure, and you won't get as much pot life out of your resin either. So the stuff that you've got mixed will cure up a lot quicker and go thicker a lot quicker. And if it flash cures too much, then it can cause it to go yellow really, really quickly. Additionally, it can, if your resin isn't cured at the appropriate temperature or too cold a temperature, then it can cause the resin to take a lot longer to cure, but also it can cause it to have a cloudiness to it, or even not cure at all, and get to that point where it's just not going to cure and it'll be flexible and rubbery. So always make sure you work at the right temperature. Now, when mixing additives to your resins, such as colours like this, or alcohol inks, then you need to make sure that you don't mix too much in. Always use the manufacturer's instructions. I never add more of a liquid like this into my resin more than about 4%. Any more than that, and often all you're doing is you're wasting it because you don't need that amount. It will affect the way that your resin cures. It can prevent the resin from curing at all, or it can cause a flash cure, depending on what you're using. Acrylic paints can often cause a flash cure because a lot of acrylic paint contains water. And water and resin just don't mix. Now, if you're using dry ingredients like chameleon flakes, chameleon powder, or mica powder, or things like that, then actually it doesn't matter how much you're going to put into it. It isn't going to affect your resin curing. It will still cure. So if you use 60% sand, for instance, which is a dry ingredient, and 40% resin, you're still going to get a nice cure. But remember, whenever you're adding anything into resin, you are changing its properties, and actually it may not be guaranteed anymore to do what it says it's going to do because you've changed it. Now, a lot of companies, they don't say this in any of their marketing or anything like that. All they do is when they've tested it to cure, they've done it in laboratory conditions without any additives, just part A, part B mixed together. So just be aware of that. One of the other things that's really important is when you've mixed your resin and you've spent time to ensure that it's bubble free, like I have here, the last thing you want to do is introduce bubbles into your resin again when you're pouring it. So I would suggest that you always pour slowly. If for this mold, there's a little mound on here, I will pour over the top of that mound and let the resin pour down. Another way to do it is pouring slowly, but pouring down a stick or something like this. This will really help. And then I will pour it in a couple of stages. I'll pour it like this first, and then I'll do some squidgy widgy in all the corners and around the edges to release any bubbles. And then once I feel confident that I've released any of the bubbles, then I can just continue to pour this until it's full. Pouring slowly until you get to the edge of your mold, and then leave it for about 5 minutes before you do anything else with it, because any bubbles that are trapped in there will release and come up to the top. And once you've left it for 5 minutes, if you're using a silicone mold, Then you can go over it with a long neck lighter and burst any of those bubbles that have come up. What you don't want to be doing is leaving your lighter in any of the areas too long, because that will overheat that resin and can cause a slight burn to the surface of the resin, or it can cure that surface a lot quicker than the rest of the resin and cause ripples or uneven surface. The other thing you don't want to do is use a torch. Now, I've shown this in loads of videos, and I always say, please never use a torch, always use a long neck lighter. Because if you use a torch, this burns at 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. Your molds probably can only take a temperature of about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and you will weld the mold to your resin, which is the last thing you want to do, because it will ruin your resin and it will ruin your mold. That's the best way to avoid introducing bubbles into your resin when you're pouring. Don't be tempted to spray alcohol in a mister bottle. That just pushes alcohol into your atmosphere. It's very irritating to the lungs, but you should be wearing a mask anyway. But also, it's not great for the work surfaces, and it is very flammable. You go and use a lighter afterwards, you can cause a fire. And I have known that to happen. Not to me, but to someone else. This is what this looks like cured up now. So let's just take it out of the mold. There we go. That has come out really well. I'm very pleased with that. And that is why it's so important to pour and mix your resin correctly, because you'll get great clear results like that. And that's not been near a pressure pot, that's not been near anything other than just sitting there curing. And this is a common one as well. A lot of people, when they first start, buy one bottle of resin and hope it's going to do all the jobs that they want it to do. And unfortunately, that is a common error, and it's something that's going to cause you mistakes. If you want to make things like coasters, what you need is a heat-resistant resin. Because if not, what will happen is you'll put hot cups of tea or coffee on a coaster, and the water will warm that coaster up, and it could get sticky or bend. So make sure you're using a good quality heat-resistant resin. The same for if you're making jewellery or keychains. Now, I make a lot of jewellery, and I've got lots of jewellery videos. Some I make with UV resin, and some I make with one-to-one epoxy resin. Now, if I'm using UV resin, I use a variety of different resins. Normally, I alternate between high viscosity resin, which will give me a nice dome, and the low viscosity resin, which will allow me to make things that are quite flat. And look at those. They're really, really pretty. That is one of my favourite pendants I've made in such a long time. Now, if I'm using an epoxy resin to make jewellery, I tend to go for the pure glossy. It's crystal clear, anti-yellowing, it's very low odour, but it does give the glossiest effect I've ever seen on resin. And I'm sure my members would agree with you on that, and anybody that's used it. If I want to make a bowl like this, I tend to use an easy coat, which is this particular resin, or a top coat resin. And the reason is these cure quite quickly, but also they cure really hard. They're great at self-leveling, and like I said, superior hardness on this. They're lovely and clear, and they're so easy to use. They make great bowls that are not going to go out of shape. But if I'm pouring something deep, like a deep mold or a large volume of resin, I need that to cure slowly, so we don't get that flash curing and exothermic reaction that is going to cause problems like yellowing and things like that. It also allows bubbles to be released over a lot longer period of time, so it comes out lovely and clear. So this is an example of something I poured using a deep pour resin. That is a really nice big lump. It's a bookends. And that come out lovely and clear, no flash curing. It's often mixed up as a 2-to-1 or sometimes even a 3-to-1. And it will cure really slowly. In a coolish room, that may take up to 72 hours to fully cure. So don't worry if after 48 hours it's still looking a bit runny, because that is another common mistake. People think, oh, it's not going to cure, and then they stick their fingers in it or they throw it away, when actually if you'd waited another 12 hours or a little bit longer, it would have cured fully. Making sure that you use the correct resin is really important, because not all resins are created equal, and there isn't one brand of resin that can be used for every project. The next mistake I see is where people are using a porous material, putting that into their resin and not sealing it first. It's really important to seal stuff that's porous or that is going to cause a lot of bubbles. Now, one of those things is flowers. I use a lot of flowers in my resin, often things that I've dried myself. These are all ones that I've dried myself. Now, firstly, you can seal them in resin, like this has been sealed in resin, and so I could now put that into something. It would be fine, not going to release any bubbles. For something like this flower, I would certainly spray this first with a good sealer, let that dry up, then give it another spray, and then pop it in my resin, because that way it is less likely to release any bubbles and trap bubbles as well when you're using it. If you're using paper or wood or things like that in your resin, then again, try and seal them. Now, some people laminate paper, and that does work. I've used that method a lot, but sometimes you can see the lamination in it. You can see the little laminating sheet. I tend to seal things with clear transparent Mod Podge or a clear spray, or sometimes just a clear varnish will help. So always seal things, or if you're not sure whether it's going to do it, do a little tester first to see if it's going to release bubbles, or like when you're putting photographs into resin or things like that, that it's not going to ruin the photograph. This is a big one, and it can be really, really annoying if you don't get this right. And that's working on a level surface. Now, this is quite a level area that I work on, and I also have some leveling boards. I'm not going to get them out and show you those, but they really do make it easier to keep things level. Now, this one's really important, and that's not managing your expectations. We all make mistakes, and resin can be fickle. It really can. Sometimes it does things that you never ever anticipated doing. Don't feel that just because things don't go well that you're not doing a good job. And don't expect immediate perfection. It does take a bit of time to get used to using resin and learning how it works. Same as it does if you're making molds and things like that. It isn't the resin's fault. A lot of people complain and say, oh, your resin's no good, or this resin's no good. It actually isn't 99% of the time the problem of the resin. Often it's how it's been stored, or the room it's been worked in, or what you've added to it, or the fact that you've just tried to use too much and it's flash cured. We all make mistakes, believe me. I would say now I have about an 80% success rate on projects. When I do jewelry, I always expect one or two pieces that I've made not to work out. And I try and show my disasters as well as my successes in all my videos, because I think it's important for you to know that people like myself who have been using resin for years still make mistakes, or things still go wrong. So don't worry, don't let it put you off if certain things haven't worked out well. So keep practicing, keep trying, but don't let it beat you, because things don't always go as you expect them to go. And on my notes here for my last one, I've got here PPE, safety, 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 because I harp on about this so much. I'm not going to talk about it in this video other than what I've already mentioned throughout this video. I have got a video coming up at the end of this one that if you're interested in using resin, or if you're using resin now, that is a must watch. So check out the video that's coming up now. It will give you some great information and allow you to use resin safely and securely. Because a lot of people, and I'm talking a lot of people, and YouTubers as well, don't use PPE. And it sets a bad example, and it can make you very, very ill. Please check out this video. If you do nothing else that I've said today in this video, check out this video. Have I said check out this video enough? I think I may have done. But if there's something you think I've missed and that you think is really important, please put it in the comments below so that other people can read those comments and learn as well from what you've said. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Boop that like button, hit that subscribe button, but most of all, enjoy your resin. Take care. Bye.